when people have too much information or too much knowledge, and like they get paralyzed and they don't make decisions. And I think when you get into moments like these where the world is changing radically and we have all these new innovations where people don't know where the next like rock is going to be on the lake to step on, it creates a ton of anxiety and uncertainty because there's so many variables you can't control. But the thing is adaptability is essentially taking a step forward and pushing forward when you don't know what's going to be like, knowing that you can handle it. I was doing some research and I was finding a bunch of things. So this actually started out when I had a thought. I was like, I feel like women are going to have a hard time with the rise of AI, like particularly. And like this was my thought without doing any research, nothing was backing it up. And when like my theory on this is that women are doing really well in college actually compared to men. And we know that AI is going to affect the white collar jobs the most. And so these are the jobs where there's a huge like cognitive load and there are repetitive tasks. So those are the jobs that AI, people foresee affecting the most. Well, I was like, women are actually in a lot of these jobs, and I wonder like what their replacement jobs are going to be after AI, affects these certain careers.
So you're assuming that when AI grows, that people are going to lose jobs in those white collar areas because AI is taking them over?
Yeah, so I don't know if it's necessarily like lose jobs. I know some people will, but I know that like there's going to be a lot of cognitive load taken off of people. And so whether or not it's losing jobs or you have one person doing what four people used to do. I don't know how it's going to look. All I know is that there is going to be, a shift here. And when I was looking back at like the Industrial Revolution and you had, people working in factories, once their jobs were taken over on, like the factory line, they had a replacement job because they were able to go into, like the office and work in administration. And so I, my thought is like, okay, so if AI is taking over these white collar jobs or like massively affecting it, like what are the replacement jobs for the people in those? And I don't know like the answer to that like entirely because this is really complicated, but like from the looks of it, it doesn't seem like there's much like replacement jobs. And I know like people are putting like a lot of focus on the trades and so like this is like, construction, electrician, plumbing and whatnot. Um, and I had thought like these are particularly male dominated careers. So my theory was women might be at a particularly vulnerable place. And so I went online and I was like doing some research into it. And I had found several different articles about it actually. And so here's one by the Harvard Business School. And they had found that in a data set with I think 18 countries and over 140,000 people, women were 20% less likely to use AI compared to men. And a couple of their reasonings were one, women were more suspicious of privacy reasons, like with the data. Um, and yeah, like overall, like women just were more suspicious of this tool.
So wait a minute, before you go on, I guess I like to go back and I like to go practical with some of this stuff. So as you're reading this and as you're finding this data, how does it relate to you? Do you, as a young woman, do you see this being true, or do you see this being oh, I didn't realize that?
Yeah, so I'm glad you actually you're pulling out the practicality because I always love that. Um, there is one more statistic I want to bring up, and then I want to answer your question. So, another thing from the U.S. Census Bureau is that between 93 and 97% of all US secretaries and administrative assistants between 2000 and 2019 are women. And for comparison, between 40 and 44% of all workers during the same period were women. So there's like this huge amount of women in these certain roles that could be highly affected by AI. So going back to answer your question, like practically, I think that as we kind of come into these like next 10, 20, whatever you want to say, years, our lives are going to be like radically changed because of, this sort of tool. I foresee it, and I think, some of you other people do, I foresee it being an industrial revolution. And I think practically, like, we need to be prepared for our lives to be changed, and we need to hold on to some principles like adaptability. And I know, like, particularly for myself, that is going to be really important because I'm going to have the skills and knowledge and the tools to face the problems of life changing. And when AI starts to change the world around us, like, we do need to adapt. Like, practically, I know for like my work, one of the things that I've been mindful to do is use AI because it gives you so much information and like knowledge that like otherwise would take you hours and hours to get. And I know it's been like super helpful in that, like, even with like my own job, I'm like, I am able to do a job of someone who is like 4 levels ahead of me because of the vast amount of information that's out there. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing. Obviously, like, you have to use it appropriately, like you shouldn't like cheat or whatever. But like the thing is people are going to use it. And so like you have to get comfortable using it.
But for somebody who's listening to us today or watching us today, what does that mean when you say adaptability? What skills does that really entail?
So the adaptability is the ability to change when life around you is uncertain.
So for instance, can you give an example?
So I actually have an anecdotal experience. So I was set to go to Germany for a year as an exchange student. And I had this trip planned for, I think, over a year or maybe a year. And so I had pretty much planned my kind of like college around this. Like, this was like years of planning, in advance. And 11 days before the trip, it got canceled. And so I was like, oh, what am I supposed to do for the next, year, when even after that? And I had to literally plan out an entire year in 11 days because my trip got canceled right when school began. So that is that's an example of adaptability.
And what would it have looked like if you hadn't been adaptable at that point?
I was homeschooled. So this is actually, I have a really solid belief that this would be like what that would look like. I have a solid belief that it would have looked like me taking like months to like get up and start like classes and like kind of like figure everything out. And that's not good because you need to be pushing forward. You need to be excelling because otherwise you're going to fall behind.
Well, I think it would have caused a lot of anxiety as well. I mean, sometimes we sit back and go, I have no idea what to do. Oh my gosh, my life is
Yeah,
ruined.
because it's too much. Yeah. I think sometimes like I could definitely see myself like being in that position and being like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do, so I'm not going to do anything because there's so much. And I think, and this is something I'm noticing, when people have too much information or too much knowledge and like they get paralyzed and they don't make decisions. And I think when you get into moments like these where the world is changing radically and we have all these new innovations where people don't know where the next like rock is going to be on the lake to step on, it creates a ton of anxiety and uncertainty because there's so many variables you can't control. But the thing is adaptability is essentially taking a step forward and pushing forward when you don't know what's going to be like, knowing that you can handle it. And I think that's going to be so helpful for people, like just practically, is that, hey, you may spend, 4 years getting a college degree. and you actually may not use your college degree, but you like having that mindset and like knowing, hey, I can handle this, I think is so important for people.
I think it is a mindset thing too. I think I agree with you on that. It's what's our self talk. If something happens and somebody, it's like the statement. Have you ever heard the statement? Somebody moved the cheese.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same type of thing. It's like, okay, I thought this was the way to do this, and then all of a sudden it's not. Now what do? I've got a decision to make. Do I just throw up my hands and go, hey, I don't want to change.
Yeah.
I don't like change. I don't want to change. I'm going to do this. I don't want to keep doing the same thing and get stuck. Or do you say, you know what? I don't like change, but I have to change.
Yeah.
And I need to figure this out. When I was growing up, we didn't have computers. In fact, when I was in high school, we had a class of about 500, 550 students in our graduating class. So it's a pretty large group. And we had our very first computer. It was a desktop kind of a thing with the tapes that punch holes in it and stuff. And that computer came, and we were allowed to see the computer, but only the top, I think, 4 to 5 math students actually got to actually operate the computer. Oh. And so, I mean, that was the first initial, computer that we had. It wasn't until I was in college that I started using like a word processor. Actually, it was before college. I was starting to use a word processor, which I think is a precursor to like the typewriters that had storage, memory storage.
Yeah.
And then those kind of progressed into computers that we had available and stuff. And so the question was, do I just keep doing things the way that I have, or am I going to learn how to use this stuff?
Even I'm experiencing that with like data collection and data analysis. Like that's kind of a part of my job, and like figuring out like how to use like Google Sheets. I know I'm gonna have to learn like Excel. Like there's so much to it, and the world is constantly changing. Like I'm sure once I figure out Google Sheets, there's going to be another thing that pops up where it's like, oh, you actually have to learn this. And I was actually saying this to you like before that we started recording. Like one of the things that I really like appreciate about you is watching like your adaptability. You've like consistently put yourself in like an uncomfortable position and tried to learn those resources, and I like you're better for it. It's actually pretty easy to work with you because you understand like technology. This also reminds me of you and I were talking a couple months ago. So you guys own a business on the side, and you're just like sharing with me kind of like past things that have happened with like the economy and whatnot, and how you guys have adapted to that. And what you have this saying that if things go well, you're not all that in a bag of chips. Wait, you're not all that in a bag of chips, but also like if things go bad, like don't worry, like it's not your fault. There's some things
out of your fault.
Yeah, there's some things out of your control. And I feel like that's also something to like keep in mind, is I believe that people should take up responsibility, as much responsibility as they can bear, but also like not putting so much pressure on yourself when things go wrong, because again, you can't control everything.
Well, I think there's also a faith aspect to it. At least it has been in my life. It's scary sometimes when changes take place and the things that were familiar are no longer there. And you have to adapt. And, our business we've been in business, and mostly my husband and some of our kids are running it, but we've had the business for 30 years, and there's been a lot of changes. There's been a lot. It's an auto business, and in the auto industry and in the marketing of it and all of that stuff. If you think about all the changes that have taken place in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Just in the types of cars and the what people are looking for, and then you add AI on top of that, and you add this, the computer ability. When we first put up and it was probably about 20 some years ago that we put up our first website, and it was an AOL website. I look back on it and it's so funny because it was, but we took pictures of the cars with a flatbed scanner. Or with a Polaroid camera, and then used a flatbed scanner to put them on the website.
Oh, so
And,
good.
I think about all of the changes we've made over this time. And I loved the fact that we were one of the first independent car dealerships that had a website at the
I know,
time.
I heard that.
And I was looking at it and I was studying, how do the big guys do it? How do the franchise new car dealers market their vehicles on the
Yeah.
website? And it was like, okay, well, this is the way they photograph their cars, so this is what we're going to try to do. But it is, you have to be adaptable, and you have to, I think about all the changes that have taken place over those 30 years.
Yeah. I love that you brought up like the faith aspect to it, because I'm like looking at all of this like research and all the changes that are happening, um and I'm just like thinking about how this like impacts like our faith and like how we walk through these changes. And I was just like so grateful, um like looking back on things that have happened to me in the past, and like really just like thanking Jesus for giving me the tools to learn adaptability, because we moved literally like 6 times in 5 years, even with that experience that I had with having to like uproot my entire plan for a couple years and like replan it all in less than 2 weeks. um, that was a really interesting experience, but it also like made me realize that I'm not like walking through it alone, and that like he's got me, because I've literally seen him move so many times. And I think like particularly like right now it is really scary, because I'm sure for like women out there, they're like, "Oh, is my job going to be here in 5 years? Like what am I going to do? I have to put food on the table. I have to feed people. I have to make a living." And I think just like knowing and remembering that, for one, there is so much work to do out there. I'm reminded of the verse. I don't particularly remember exactly how it goes, but it says it's like you should ask God to provide workers, because there's like uh, I want to figure it out. You should ask God to provide workers because there's
Harvest
work.
is
Yeah, the
plentiful.
harvest is plentiful.
And that's actually a verse referring to um, sharing your faith with others.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things, going back to where I feel like faith is in this whole issue, is in the 30 some years and even before, we had we've had really, really lean periods. I mean, we've gone through recessions, and we've gone through different, actually some of the worst times were when there was a boom, and people were buying new cars, not used cars. And so, I mean, we've gone through really, really rough times, really low times, and times when you could sit there and you wondered if the phone was even working. You'd pick it up to make sure there was a dial tone on the business phone,
Mm-hmm.
because nobody was calling. And it's like, okay, can it get through? And our response is, we really believe that everything that we have comes from God. So really, it's all His. And that's a belief that carries us through those things, because it's like, okay, well, no, we didn't lose this much money last year. God did.
Mm-hmm.
And it just gives a peace of mind that says, hey, this is something that's like, okay, if He wants to lose this money, that's His prerogative. We'll just keep moving forward in doing the things that we know are right to do.
Yeah.
And it gives a peace of mind. It gives a set of comfort, even in difficult, stressful, anxious producing times.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm also reminded of the verse of, the father, clothes the lilies. So he, oh my gosh, why am I usually have a really good memory, but today it's not working. So I hope everyone knows that verse. It's Jesus. He, he provides for the sparrows. So why
Yeah.
would he not provide for you?
Yeah.
It's a tough day out.
He clothes
The lilies
the
and
field and
yeah.
so on. Yeah. And you can look these up. If you just even, that's okay. We go back to AI. Um, for instance, using Google search, which is mostly AI now.
Yeah.
You can put in parts of a Bible verse, and it'll direct you to the right one.
So I'd say as like we're closing this out, I think the point that we want to wrap this all in a bow with is that it's so important to be adaptable. So ladies, thank you guys so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you gals soon.